A gray airfield in the autumn of 1943. A four-engine bomber taxis in from the cold, and as it slows, you can see it. The skin of the aircraft is freckled with holes. Engineers in long coats walk the length of the fuselage with clipboards, marking each puncture in the wings, the tail, the belly. They are trying to answer a simple question: where should we add the armor? And the planes themselves seem to answer. Here, they say, where the metal is torn, protect us here. It was the wrong answer, and the man who saw why would change how careful people think for the next 80 years. Margin of calm, the lesson the dead can't teach you. The setting is a townhouse on West 118th Street in Manhattan, wartime New York. Inside is the Statistical Research Group, mathematicians lent to the military, pencils instead of rifles, working out the cold arithmetic of survival. The Air Force brought them a problem worth solving. Bombers were being lost over Europe at a rate that could not continue. Add armor and a plane survives more hits, but armor is weight, and weight costs range, fuel, maneuverability, payload. You cannot plate the whole aircraft, so you must choose. You must armor only the places that matter most. The officers had done their homework. They surveyed the bombers returning from raids and mapped every bullet hole across the fleet. The pattern was clear and consistent. The fuselage was riddled, the wings were riddled, the damage clustered in the body and the wingtips, dense as a swarm. The conclusion seemed obvious: reinforce where the holes are, put the steel where the enemy is clearly aiming. At the table sat a quiet Hungarian mathematician named Abraham Wald. A refugee from a Vienna that no longer wanted him, he had a habit of looking at a problem until it turned over and showed its underside. And he asked the question that everyone in the room had walked straight past. Where are the bullet holes that aren't here? Consider what the data actually was. It was a survey of the planes that came back, only the planes that came back. Every bomber on that airfield was, by definition, a survivor. It had taken its damage and still carried its crew home. So the holes they were counting were the survivable holes. A plane could be shot through the wing, through the fuselage, and still limp across the channel. The places with no holes, the engines, the cockpit, were not lucky. They were silent. A plane hit there did not come back to be measured. It went into the sea or into a field in France, and it took its data with it. Wald's insight reversed the whole picture. Armor the bombers not where the returning planes were hit, but where they weren't. The clean spots on the survivors marked the wounds that killed. The military listened. The reasoning held. Versions of his analysis shaped how aircraft were protected through the rest of the war and beyond. This is the trap, and it has a name: survivorship-bias. When you study only the things that made it through, your data is missing everyone the process killed, and the missing are exactly the ones with the lesson. The graveyard does not fill out surveys, the dead do not write memoirs, and so we draw our maps from the living and call the empty spaces safe. Now leave the airfield, because this is not a story about planes. It is a story about every piece of advice you have ever taken from someone who succeeded. You know the script: the billionaire who dropped out of college, Gates left Harvard, Jobs left Reed, Zuckerberg walked out of Cambridge and into a fortune. And so the lesson assembles itself, clean and seductive: the bold leave. School is for the cautious, bet everything. But look where the bullet holes aren't. For every founder who dropped out and became a household name, there is a vast and unphotographed crowd who did the exact same thing, quit the same degree, chased the same idea with the same nerve, and quietly went broke. They are not on the magazine cover, they are not on the stage, they returned to no airfield. The strategy that looks like the cause of success is more often just the cost of admission to a lottery most people lose. The same flaw hides inside almost every fortune from nothing story you admire. The lottery winner who tells you to follow your gut and buy the ticket, a perfect strategy, visible only because it happened to work, surrounded by 100 million silent losers who followed the same gut. Successful people wake at 5 a.m., so do plenty of unsuccessful ones. The alarm clock is not on the cover because failure does not get a cover. We mistake the survivors for a sample. They are not a sample. They are the residue, what was left after chance and circumstance did most of the work, and then quietly removed the evidence. So how do you defend yourself against a bias built out of absence, against a lie made of missing pieces rather than false ones? You learn to ask Wald's question out of habit. In front of every success story, the same quiet sentence, who did exactly this and is not here to tell me? Where is the graveyard for this strategy, and how crowded is it? When a fund advertises its track record, you ask about the funds the firm closed and buried, the ones erased from the brochure so the average can shine. When a stock picker shows you 10 winning calls, you ask how many calls there were in total. 10 out of 12 is a gift. 10 out of 1,000 is a coin, flipped by a man who only mentions the heads. When someone tells you this is how I got rich, you listen, and then you go looking for the people who took the same path into the same dark and never came back to narrate it. Their absence is not proof the path is bad. It is proof the path is dangerous, and that the storyteller in front of you may simply be the one the bullet missed. If these are the kinds of questions you'd rather ask before you risk something than after, this channel is built for exactly that. A new essay arrives twice a week. On the mind and the money it tends to mislead. Subscribe and keep the better questions close. Wald's gift was never really about armor. It was a way of seeing, a refusal to mistake the visible for the whole. The world hands you a fleet of survivors and asks you to learn from them. The wise read the survivors and the silence between them. Picture the airfield once more. The bombers that came home, lined up and floodlit, each one a story of nerve and luck. And behind them, in the dark beyond the lights, the ones that didn't, the empty hangar space where 100 other planes should be parked, saying nothing. Most of life's advice is delivered from the lit half of that field. The confident voices, the round numbers, the clean before and after. The whole truth is always larger and quieter, and stands just outside the floodlights where no one is filming. You don't have to fear the silence, you only have to remember it is there and to count with care the planes that aren't. Because the costliest stories are not the ones that lie to you, they're the ones that simply never mention the dead. Wealth is not what you have, it's what you no longer need to chase. Until next time.